Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You guys, I am so sorry for the late video today. I guess technically it's like the new day, but yeah, my body has been womaning. If you know, you know. Anyway, today we are continuing with the reading of Thousand Autumns, Volume 3, also known as Shen Qiao by Meng Xi Shi. We're covering chapters 77 through 79. As always, I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 77, Enemies. When it came to tailor shops, Heji was probably the most famous throughout Tonggu County. Everyone would agree. Heji's owner, Madame Fang, also thought so. She wasn't very old, not even 30, but she'd already been a widow for over 10 years. She'd only been married into her husband's family for 2 years when he suddenly fell sick and died. At that time, Madame Fang had been pregnant with his child. Her parents-in-law had felt guilty, so they gave her the money to open the tailor shop. Afterwards, her parents-in-law also passed away one after the other, with her husband's younger brother inheriting the family business. Unfortunately, her brother-in-law was incompetent, and he squandered all the wealth and property completely within a couple of years. Instead, it was Madame Fang's shop that prospered, growing even larger. It wasn't only in Tonggu County. Heji even had branches in the capital of Feng Province in Liangquan County. But Madame Fang was attached to her hometown. Even though she owned property in Liangquan County, she remained in Tonggu. She'd risen early today to inspect one of her stores. When the shopkeeper heard that the owner had come, he quickly ran out to greet her. At this time, another person arrived at their door. "I apologize to this customer," said the shopkeeper, walking over to the newcomer while smiling. "Our owner has come to inspect the accounts, so at the moment we're not—" Only halfway through his sentence, intimidated by the newcomer's appearance and aura, he found himself unable to continue. Wushi raised his eyebrows. "You're not doing business?" Madame Fang pushed past the shopkeeper and smiled sweetly. "We're open and welcome for customers. Why wouldn't we be doing business? My worker was impolite. I apologize to the gentleman on his behalf. May I ask what kind of fabric the gentleman wishes to purchase? We also sell ready-made clothes in many styles. If you wish to select a fabric and have it custom-made, we can have it prepared in as little as 2 days." She'd been a merchant for more than 10 years, so she considered her knowledge and experience far beyond the average married woman who stayed in their chambers. But who could have known that in front of this man she felt as ignorant as if she'd spent her life looking up at the sky from a well? The man's face and bearing were both exceptional. Forget their county magistrates, even the provincial officers couldn't compare. Merchants opened shops to do business. There was no reason to refuse customers at their door, especially not such an outstanding character as him. After seeing him, which woman wouldn't feel a little on edge, her maiden's heart blossoming? Even Madame Fang's smile had become a few touches more genuine. Originally, Wushi had wanted to pick out 2 outfits, but after hearing her words, he had another idea. "In other words, you also sell ready-made outfits for women?" "Yes, of course." Madame Fang's smile didn't change, but she couldn't help feeling somewhat disappointed inside. He was such a handsome gentleman and looked so arrogant and unyielding, definitely not the type who could be ordered around by a docile woman. Yet he'd personally come to purchase clothes for one. Half a month ago, Shen Qiao and Wushi had left the mountain cavern. They traveled continuously south until yesterday, when they arrived and stopped at Tonggu County in Feng Province, not that far from Hanzhong. Shen Qiao liked the quiet. Whenever he had time, he'd practice martial arts in the inn, never finding it dull. So Wushi went out on his own. To err on the side of caution, it would be best if they kept to themselves before they arrived in Chang'an, so as to avoid encountering anyone. But this was impossible. Just meals and lodging required them to enter an inn, for starters. Besides, if he were to cower in fear at any sign of potential danger, then he wouldn't be Wushi. He'd originally wanted to purchase 2 outfits as changes of clothes, but after hearing Madame Fang's words, he'd changed his mind. "Is this gentleman purchasing it for his sweetheart, his sister, or a senior relative?" asked Madame Fang. "What's the difference?" asked Wushi. A giggle escaped Madame Fang. I can tell that the gentleman has never purchased clothes for a woman before. There's naturally a science here. For older relatives, the color must not be too bright. It's better to be a bit more modest and the embroidery less fashionable. If it's for your sister, you can choose colors like pale pink or willow green, with butterflies or roses for the skirt pattern. If you gave that to a senior, such designs would be much too frivolous. And what if it's for a sweetheart? Asked Yen Wushi. Madame Fang suppressed a flicker of disappointment. If it's for your sweetheart, then you can just select the colors and patterns she likes. What color does your sweetheart prefer? Yen Wushi thought for a while. Perhaps sky blue? Sky blue is a difficult one to wear, said Madame Fang, unless her skin is very fair. Yen Wushi smiled briefly. Well, it is indeed quite fair. Then does your esteemed self wish to purchase a ready-made outfit of some fabric for a custom-made one? If you want something ready-made, we have various measurements available. How tall is the lady? Yen Wushi only wanted to take a bit of revenge on Shen Qiao, to give him a taste of dressing up as a woman. But when he heard Madame Fang's words, he grew a little interested. About half a head shorter than me, and a bit thinner. Madame Fang was shocked. Half a head shorter than you? Then that woman is incredibly tall. Please, let me send someone to look. I'm not sure if our shop has a garment in the measurements you need. How about the style? What kind of shape would you like the blouse and skirt to have? Yen Wushi raised an eyebrow, then looked her over from all sides. Shape? I think what you have is quite nice. Madame Fang's heart was pounding from his gaze. Her eyes grew soft and liquid as she bit her lip and smiled. The gentleman likes what I have? They were only a breath apart, nearly touching. The shopkeeper and worker were clearly accustomed to their owner's flirtatious behavior. They'd already closed the doors of the shop and gone to hide somewhere else. Yen Wushi smiled slightly, then lifted her chin. He lowered his head to examine her closely, as if he were about to kiss her. Even her breaths became searing hot. A pity that your clothes are quite nice, yet your face is nothing special. Such a waste of good clothing, said Yen Wushi. Madame Fang's face went blank, as if she were unable to process what he had said. Only after Yen Wushi took a few steps back did she suddenly come to her senses. Her face alternated between green and white, and she gritted her teeth. This shop is not open for business today. The gentleman should leave. What could be more intolerable to a woman than calling her ugly? She'd originally wanted to tell him to get lost, but amiability was the key to prosperity for a merchant. Madame Fang also didn't want to cause herself any trouble. The fewer complications, the better. But beneath her blouse, her chest was rising and falling slightly. It was obvious she was incensed. Yen Wushi sneered a little. Your courting attempt failed, so your shame enraged you? He fished out a heavy purse and placed it on the table. If you want to run a business, being too quick to anger isn't good. And if you keep frowning like that, won't you age faster? Madame Fang yelled angrily. Such a venomous mouth! Your sweetheart must be suffering from 8 lives worth of misfortune to have caught the eye of someone like you. After saying this, she picked up the purse, wanting to throw it at him. However, the moment she lifted it, her expression faltered. On the mahogany table beneath the purse was a slight concave imprint left by the purse. The table was of solid wood in construction. Even placing a large stone atop it might not crush it, let alone a purse of silver. Only now did Madame Fang realize she'd encountered someone extraordinary. Her expression cycled through a kaleidoscope of changes, and in the end, she forced a smile. The great gentleman is most magnanimous. Please don't hold anything against an insignificant woman. Your esteemed self wanted a set of sky blue clothing, ready-made. This one will have someone look for some. So she said, but her heart had long filled with loathing toward Yen Wushi. She couldn't stop herself from cursing him, wishing for his sweetheart to prove fickle soon and cast him aside. Of course, Yen Wushi couldn't tell what Madame Fang was thinking, and even if he could, he wouldn't care. Once he finished purchasing the clothes, he had someone send them to the inn. Then he left the shop empty-handed, leaving Madame Fang gnashing her teeth behind him. The streets of the county town wouldn't be as lively as those in a provincial capital, but there were still people coming and going. After walking several dozen steps, Yan Wushi suddenly stopped. He laughed quietly. Whose mice are you? Skulking about and afraid to show yourselves? His words were soft and slow, but they suddenly seemed to explode in the ears of everyone nearby. The common people had no idea what was going on. After their initial shock, they naturally all ran a good distance away as to not invite disaster upon themselves. Yen Wushi stood with his hands behind his back. He lifted his head to watch the birds sweeping over the horizon, carefree and content, yet completely unmoving. Some time ago, we heard that Sect Leader Yan had been killed in an ambush by 5 great martial artists. My Shitsun even felt sorry for so long. To think, Sect Leader Yan really was so extraordinary he could survive even such a situation as that. Truly worthy of admiration. The delicate laugh was sweet and pleasing to the ears, seemingly both near yet far as it drifted about. But the moment that admiration fell, a woman dressed in red suddenly appeared atop the roof to the right of Yan Wushi. Yan Wushi didn't glance at her, but said coolly, "You're already here, but you still try to hide. This is all Huan sect members are good at. No wonder you sought support from Qi. Now that Qi's been destroyed, you've all become stray dogs. To whom will you enslave yourself next?" Sect Leader Yan's words are so funny. Those who did not know better would even think Huanyue sect virtuous and noble. But in the end, isn't Huanyue sect also the slave of Yuan Yong? Pity that Yuan Yong won't be alive for long. Without your protection, your disciples and subordinates are now even more wretched than some stray dogs. Accompanied by a cold laugh, another person appeared before Yan Wushi. If Shen Qiao were here, he'd recognize him at a glance. If they're that incapable and require my protection for everything, then they should just die earlier and save me the trouble. Yan Wushi looked at Xiao Se, shaking his head. On the contrary, my venerable self truly pities Yuan Xiuxiu. She accepted an ingrate as a disciple, and then he goes and spends all his time hanging out with Sang Jingxing's bunch. But Sang Jingxing doesn't have an eye for people either. His old disciple Huo Xijing might have been completely brainless, but at least his martial arts were passable. However, not only are you brainless, your martial arts are complete garbage. Seems like Huan's sect grows worse with each generation. Xiao Se was so angry, he laughed instead. Sect Leader Yan truly has the nimblest of tongues. Don't kneel and beg for mercy later. With their abilities, Xiao Se and Bai Zhong could be considered first-rate within the Jianghu. If the two of them joined forces, it would be difficult for Yan Wushi to beat them back with his current condition. But Yan Wushi's focus wasn't on either of them at the moment. Instead, it was on the man slowly approaching him from behind. "How long did you all wait here before this venerable one finally appeared?" he asked. Bai Zhong replied sweetly, "We heard that Buddhist master Xue Ting had a chance encounter with Sect Leader Yan in Wei province. Then he lost track of Sect Leader Yan's whereabouts afterward. Elder Yan said that Sect Leader Yan would definitely return to Chang'an, but for the sake of avoiding his enemies, he wouldn't take the shortest route. So we specially took a detour and waited in Feng province. Little did we expect that it really was as Elder Yan predicted." However, Sect Leader Yan, you need not be upset, because even if you'd taken a different detour, it'd still be the same. Hanzhong has the Liuhe Guild. Yang Province has the Gokturks. You're trapped no matter where you go, and there's nowhere to escape. If you want to blame something, blame the fact that you have too many enemies. Since the heavens themselves wish for your destruction, even the gods coming to your aid won't save you. The one who said this was Yan Shou. He walked toward Yan Wushi, step by step. His footfalls incredibly slow and steady, but his gaze never left Yan Wushi for even half a moment, as if he were a cheetah in wait, ready to pounce at any moment and tear its enemy apart with its sharp teeth. Yan Wushi burst into loud laughter. Gods? This venerable one has never believed in gods. As soon as these words left his mouth, he moved. Chapter 78. Fleeing for One's Life. Simply the name Yan Wushi carried an invisible, intimidating force. They knew that after the 5 great experts' ambush, even if he hadn't lost all his martial arts, his strength must be greatly reduced. Even without Sang Jingxing here, the 3 of them together should be more than enough to bring him down. But though they knew this in their minds, their bodies still didn't move. An undercurrent surged up within Huan sect. It was visible just from the movements of Xiao Se and the others. Yan Shou had once lost to Yan Wushi in the past, and it'd been a terribly miserable defeat. The reason he'd come this time wasn't to eradicate a formidable foe for Huan sect, but for the Zhuyang strategy scroll that was rumored to be in Yan Wushi's hand. However, that horrible defeat had left a deep impression on Yan Shou, and when he witnessed how calm and composed Yan Wushi was, uncertainty rose within his heart. Xiao Se was Yuan Shushu's disciple, but he wanted to bring Yan Wushi's head to Sang Jingxing to earn merits. However, when he saw that no one else was moving, he didn't budge either. Because of this, the 4 of them entered a strange standoff. Huan sect clearly held the upper hand, but not one of them chose to make the move first. Yan Shou narrowed his eyes, carefully observing Yan Wushi's every breath, waiting for him to reveal an opening. Yan Wushi finally moved. But he didn't target Xiao Se and Bai Zhong before him, nor did he turn to leap on Yan Shou. Instead, his sleeves billowed as he soared into the sky like a white crane in flight. Xiao Se's expression fell. "This is bad." Who would have expected that the mighty Huanyue sect leader would put on a come-at-me act to confound his opponents? Xiao Se normally considered himself a graceful and elegant young master, but at this moment he couldn't stop himself from swearing loudly. "If you have the balls, don't run!" Airborne laughter drifted to them. As you wish. Yan Wushi's figure suddenly reversed in midair. Within the blink of an eye, he was already in front of Xiao Se, and before Xiao Se could get a clear glimpse of Yan Wushi's attack, the wind from the man's palm was already slamming into his chest. Xiao Se was astounded, but it was too late to dodge. He could only take it head on. The 2 of them fought in close combat, and Yan Wushi's true qi was like the rise and fall of the river tide, violent and turbulent as it almost engulfed Xiao Se's. It was as overbearing and arrogant as its owner, to the point of being shocking. They'd heard that when the great 5 experts had ambushed Yan Wushi, Guangling-san had exploited his flaw, seriously injuring him. Could it be that after obtaining the scroll, he'd managed to repair his flaw within such a short amount of time, propelling his martial arts to the next level? This thought flashed through Xiao Se's mind, and his heart jolted. A sharp pain lanced through his arm, and he screamed despite himself as he wrenched backward. However, his right arm was already shattered, and the injury affected even his chest. It was as if he'd been viciously struck by a hammer. Blood splayed from Xiao Se's mouth as he collapsed to the ground. When he turned his head, another couple of crimson mouthfuls splattered onto the ground. "Xiao Shishong, are you all right?" Bai Zhong cried out in alarm as she flew over to support him. Demonic practitioners were all selfish and self-serving, and there was even a long-standing conflict between Xiao Se and Bai Zhong. Normally, Bai Zhong would have been full of schadenfreude over his misfortune, even kick him while he was down. Coming forward to help him up really wasn't her style, but right now, doing so meant that she could avoid a direct confrontation with Yan Wushi, so she didn't mind expressing some fraternal affection. Xiao Se's setback caused Yan Shou, who'd been preparing to strike, to slow a little as well, but he still ran after him and blocked his path. "Why is Sect Leader Yan in such a hurry to leave? When old friends meet, shouldn't they reminisce a little about the past?" "I also wish to reminisce about the past with Elder Yan. May I ask if Elder Yan can spare the time?" The voice who'd answered naturally wasn't Yan Wushi, but someone behind Yan Shou. Yan Shou didn't turn upon hearing these words. Instead, he flew right onto the roof, then looked down at the newcomer from above. "So, if it isn't another stray dog," he said with disdain. Shen Qiao strolled over from the other end of the street, sword on his back. Black hair and blue clothes, his figure tall and elegant like a beautiful, graceful immortal. Elder Yan owes 2 lives to this humble Taoist since the day at Bailong Monastery, says Shen Qiao. Does he still remember? I've long heard that Xuandu Mountain's former sect leader inherited Qifeng Ge's mantle and that his martial arts were unrivaled in all the Jianghu. Unfortunately, a blow from Kunye knocked him off a cliff, and he's been on the decline ever since, forced to rely on Yan Wushi's protection. Looking at things now, it seems the rumors may not have been false. Shen Qiao said coolly, Then I wonder if Elder Yan has heard the rumor that Kunye went up Mount High to provoke Bixia sect, but failed, and that he's already fallen to my blade? Yan Shou's face betrayed his faint astonishment. Bixia sect had collapsed under their internal strife and were busy struggling, trying to rally their strength even after Kunye's death, while the Gokturks themselves certainly wouldn't go around proclaiming the news. Thus, Kunye's death had been effectively concealed, and everyone thought that he'd returned to the Khaganate. No one could have imagined that he died at Shen Qiao's hands. Bai Zhong laughed sweetly. It's only been a few months, but Shenlong's martial arts have again soared. Truly a commendable feat. However, our sect leader has already ordered us to seize the Juyang strategy scroll, and Elder Song and Bao Yuan are already on their way here. No matter how amazing your martial arts are, I'm afraid you still can't take on all of Hehuan's sect. Since this matter has nothing to do with you anyway, why don't you just stand aside and watch? Yan Shou humped. As you've already arrived, there's no need to leave. You might as well stay. Yan Shou's moniker was the Buddha with the blood-stained hand. His martial arts also leaned toward the insidious and cruel, and he crooked his fingers and clawed at Shen Qiao. In the twinkling of an eye, an ill wind blasted his opponent's face, shrieking and wailing. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood seemed to fill the world around them, transforming it into the deepest of hells. The expansive blood glow was about to engulf him, bringing forth swelling despair and terror. Shen Qiao soared backward as he drew Shanhe Tongbei. Immediately, his sword qi arced like a rainbow, its light overflowing and quickly overriding most of Yan Shou's surging might. Yan Shou pursued him relentlessly, his palms neutralizing all of Shen Qiao's attacks before he sent out 3 or 4 more blows, each as quick as lightning. It made for a dizzying, overwhelming sight. Every strike pelted down like a mighty ocean wave, rising and falling like a set of heavenly stairs. Each wave was more powerful than the last, leaving his opponent absolutely no time to react. Yan Shou wasn't within the top 10, but that didn't mean that he was only an average martial artist. In the 10 years Yan Wushi spent in seclusion, Huanyue's sect had concentrated their operations on the imperial court of Zhou, while Fa Jing's sect had departed for the distant Tuyuhun. Only He Huan's sect remained in the Central Plains, and their influence in Qi especially had greatly exploded. And Yan Shou had managed to stake out a spot for himself among He Huan's sect's throng of talented members, to the point that he was equal with Sang Jingxin. This was certainly not due to his good looks. Sword in hand, Shen Qiao slashed the air horizontally. A brilliant sword glare was born, as rippling and reflective as river water, but as harsh as snow and frost. Whirling with chill, it swept forward, accompanied by murderous intent. With the battle going strong on that end, those on the other end weren't slacking either. Xiao Se and Bai Zhong surged forward side by side, hampering Yan Wushi from the front and the back, preventing him from disengaging. While Shen Qiao dueled Yan Shou, he took the time to glance at Bai Zhong and Xiao Se's attacks. He couldn't help but frown to himself. The two of them were martial experts from He Huan's sect's younger generation. Aside from the various elders, they were among the strongest in martial arts. The Xiao Bai pair were immensely talented. Every time he saw them, their martial arts always seemed to have improved by leaps and bounds, especially Bai Zhong. The first time he met her, she'd only just ascended to the ranks of first-rate martial art experts, and now, as she gave her all to catch up, her blue lotus seals had been honed to perfection. Her posture was lithe and graceful, with murderous intent lurking beneath, impossible to completely guard against. Shen Qiao knew very well that Bai Zhong had showed him great mercy several times. Earlier, under the pretext of elucidating their strength to Shen Qiao, she notified him that Sang Jingxing would be coming, telling Shen Qiao not to meddle. However, the trace of tenderness she had for Shen Qiao would definitely not be extended to Yan Wushi. At this moment, she and Xiao Se worked in tandem, their every move poised to kill. It was like an inescapable, all-encompassing net, their tacit understanding flawless as they entrapped Yan Wushi between them. Due to the heavy injuries Yan Wushi had suddenly afflicted on Xiao Se earlier, both were filled with apprehension and caution, leaving them unwilling to use their full strength. But only Shen Qiao knew that Yan Wushi's current martial strength was limited, that it hadn't even recovered to half of his peak. Seriously wounding Xiao Se was already the most he could do. Forcing him to also face off against Bai Rong, who'd improved massively, was an arduous struggle. If the battle dragged on and the two of them realized this, they'd no longer hesitate to use their full strength against Yan Wushi. And because Shen Qiao needed to handle Yan Shou, he wouldn't be able to attend to him either. Having thought this far, Shen Qiao hesitated no longer. He pushed his martial strength to the limit, eliminated all his stray thoughts, and directly entered the echelon of sword heart. In an instant, his sword glare became boundless, painting the heavens and earth together. It started with a raging momentum like thunder, then transitioned to the clear calm of light rippling over the water's surface, all concentrated within this one sword. The man exists apart from the sword, but the sword exists within his heart. Where the sword heart reaches, all existence becomes emptiness. Yan Shou's expression suddenly faltered, and he quickly withdrew and retreated, not daring to even brush the sword glare's edge. But now that Shen Qiao had released the sword glare, he had no reason to retract it again. Wrapped in white light, the sword qi chased Yan Shou in hot pursuit, firmly binding itself to him. Accompanied by rumbling thunder and galloping rapids, though the sword heart was immature and its manifestation unstable, its slash already showed the hint of power that could bring peace to the land. Shen Qiao didn't withdraw, but rather swept straight over to Bai Zhong with a swing of his blade. Bai Zhong, Xiao Se, and Yan Wushi were at an impasse, forming a precarious balance. With Yan Wushi's original martial strength, he should have been able to crush them, and this deadlock could never have happened. As it stretched on, Xiao Se and Bai Zhong grew suspicious, but suddenly a blue shadow glided past them and took Yan Wushi away. When they saw this, the three of them naturally gave chase, though Xiao Se's injuries meant he couldn't keep up. But Yan Shou pressed closely behind, unwilling to let them go so easily. "You go on first. Get to that forest we passed before entering the city. I'll hold them back." Shen Qiao's words came incredibly fast, and the instant he finished, he shoved Yan Wushi forward without waiting for a response. He grabbed his sword and turned toward the three pursuers. Yan Wushi looked back, his gaze intent. Then he turned and left without a word. Their target was getting farther and farther away, but Shen Qiao blocked their path. Even Yan Shou grew impatient, and his palm blasts seemed to transform into bloody shadows as he aimed each and every one at Shen Qiao. But Shen Qiao remained perfectly in order, and his swordplay grew steadier, more composed. In the face of Yan Shou's frenzied gale of attacks, without Yan Wushi here, he could instead focus his full attention on the situation before him. Shan He Tong Bei roared in the wind, and Shen Qiao's blue robes lent him an immortal grace. As he wielded the azure wave sword techniques that he'd improved, a majestic display arose and swept forth unhindered. It was like 1,000 flowers in bloom, the light flooding the world. For a time, the three pursuers were barred outside the sword glare, unable to advance an inch. Yan Shou gave a muffled humph, and his movements grew faster and faster, his figure flickering through poses until it was impossible to discern what was real and what wasn't. His slender fingers were like sharp blades, and whenever they touched, oceans of blood and skeletons seemed to emerge wave upon wave. His bare hand even pierced the sword screen and directly grabbed Shen Qiao's hand, still on the hilt. Shen Qiao soared forward, his figure now a blue shadow, like a dragonfly flitting across the water's surface. He barely landed before flying forward more, his toes almost never touching the ground. He pushed a rainbow stretches across the heaven, Xuandu Mountain's special Qinggong, to the epitome of perfection. If Qifengge were here, he'd be unable to suppress his praise. Against such an incredible level of Qinggong, the trees on either side were cast far behind him, hazy and indistinct. They blurred together with the enemies in hot pursuit until everything disappeared without a trace. But Shen Qiao didn't let down his guard. He drew a breath as his sleeves fluttered, his steps picking up nary a speck of dust. Even a frightened, soaring bird would be lacking in comparison. First, he went up the mountain outside the city so as to obfuscate his tracks. Then he followed a hidden path off the mountain, stopping in a small forest at its foot that lay along the road to the city. The grove wasn't very large, but because it was at the foot of the mountain, it was lush and verdant, practically a world of its own with its densely entangled vines and rugged terrain. An ordinary person entering would find themselves seemingly engulfed by the forest, and it would take a long time to find a way out. Shen Qiao supported himself with the tree trunks as he walked further in. Though he'd slowed his pace, his feet still left no imprint behind him. Even if an enemy chased him here, they'd be unable to tell whether he'd entered the forest. After about half an hour of walking, he saw that he'd entered the forest's depths and had almost reached the jungle at the foot of the mountain. Then, finally unable to push himself any further, he stopped for a short rest. A hand suddenly reached out beside him and grabbed his wrist. On alert, Shen Qiao immediately sensed the movement. He yanked his hand back and retreated, but upon seeing the newcomer's face, he immediately stopped and breathed a sigh of relief. "It's me," said Yen Wushi. He caught his wrist again, and his other hand moved to support Shen Qiao's waist as he walked him further into the forest. "Why did you take so long to get rid of them?" At this point, Shen Qiao's strength was already exhausted, so he let Yen Wushi support him, gingerly leaning half of his weight onto the man. "There's naturally nothing to worry about if it were only the three of them," said Shen Qiao. "I'd originally wanted to kill Yan Shou to avenge the abbot and Chu Yi, but then someone else came. He was dressed like a monk and looked younger than Bai Zhong, yet he was on par with Yan Shou in strength. An extended battle isn't favorable to me, so I was forced to find a chance to disengage." He didn't know that man's identity, but Yan Wushi knew right away. "You're talking about Bao Yun, one of He Huan sect's elders. He likes to disguise himself as a monk and wonders about preaching scriptures. He uses that to deceive female worshippers so they can sleep with him. The Buddhists hate him for sullying their reputation in the recent years. They've repeatedly tried to hunt him down and kill him. He doesn't appear in public much, but martially he's no weaker than Yan Shou." Hearing about the man's actions, Shen Qiao frowned despite himself, his face betraying his disgust. "Bai Zhong said just now that Sang Jingxing and Bao Yun were following behind," he said. "If Bao Yun is here, then Sang Jingxing shouldn't be far either. We must leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, with that many people, they may find us." "Can you still walk?" Shen Qiao gave a strained smile and shook his head. "I have a plan," said Yen Wushi. Yen Wushi reached out to touch his cheek, which was pallid from exhaustion. Shen Qiao turned away to evade him, but Yen Wushi still managed to stroke it once. He couldn't help but glare at Yen Wushi, who smiled slightly. "Sang Jingxing was heavily wounded by you, so he naturally hates you to the bone," Yen Wushi said. "But the other members of He Huan sect don't possess that kind of bone-deep hostility toward you. Instead, they fear you greatly. Leave by yourself and don't worry about me. Then you'll be able to shake them off, and you won't have the extra burden of me to deal with." Shen Qiao sighed. "Here I thought that you'd actually suggest a good plan. Enough with the nonsense. Let's head up the mountain." "Is it not a good plan?" asked Yen Wushi. "If I was going to abandon you, why would I have waited until now? If I'm going to save someone, I'll save them till the end. Escort the Buddha the entire journey west. I've already involved myself from the start. I must give it my all." The two of them continued forward. Shen Qiao had forced his qinggong to its limit just before, and now he felt like every step took momentous effort. He couldn't help but say, "I really can't walk anymore. You go on ahead. I'll cover for you." Yan Wushi laughed. "Ah, Qiao, you're really so cute. You want to cover for me the way you are now? If Sang Jingxing arrives, he'll swallow you whole, bones and all." Before Shen Qiao could respond, he felt his feet leave the ground. Yan Wushi was carrying him on his back. Chapter 79. Sacrifice. Shen Qiao had not anticipated Yan Wushi's actions at all, and for a moment he was stupefied. Yan Wushi's steps were graceful and swift. It only took an instant for him to cut through the forest and reach the foot of the mountain. Then he followed the mountain path upward, circling around to the other side. Shen Qiao remained stunned for a long while before finally asking, "We're heading up the mountain?" "On the backside of the mountain is a temple. It's hidden deep within the forest and has been abandoned for many years." Confused, Shen Qiao said, "You seem to be familiar with this area?" "In the past, after I battled Sui Wang, I came to this mountain for secluded cultivation." Understanding dawned on Shen Qiao, and he didn't press further. He truly was a little tired. He'd just fought hard against 4 people. Apart from Xiao Se, whom Yan Wushi had injured, Bai Zhong, Yan Shou, and Bao Yun were each stronger than the last. With Shen Qiao's current internal energy, if it weren't for the support of his sword heart, he could never have retreated safely. Though Yan Wushi walked quickly, his steps were steady. Shen Qiao could feel the warmth of his skin through their clothing. Lacking the strength to think anymore, he unknowingly drifted off to sleep. The next time he opened his eyes, he found he was no longer surrounded by a jungle, but inside a Buddhist temple. Because of its age, it had been a long time since the temple had known incense, and even the burners were nowhere to be seen. The statue of Buddha was damaged and missing parts of its body, and everything was covered in dust and spiderwebs. However, the place Shen Qiao had been laid was clean, and there was even a cloth drape beneath him for padding, ripped from 2 nearby pillars. Though it was tattered, it was still better than sleeping directly on the cold stone floor. He rested his back against the wall for a while. He hadn't suffered any serious injuries earlier, but ever since his battle with Xue Ting, he'd been slowly accumulating internal injuries. This left him unable to utilize his full strength and was one of the reasons why he'd failed to kill Yan Shou. When Bao Yun joined in, he'd lost his chance completely. Shen Qiao held his groggy head and let out a light sigh. A hand stroked him. Caught off guard, Shen Qiao was startled by the icy sensation, and he couldn't help but shiver. "Why are you sighing?" Yan Wushi was sitting next to him. He was reading a piece of cloth that he held in his hand. Shen Qiao squinted at the silk for a moment, scrutinizing it, before he confirmed that it was the Zhuyang strategy scroll that Yan Wushi had seized from Cheng Gong. He was about to speak when he saw Yan Wushi's hand flip over. The silk fluttered right into the fire and was swallowed by the flames in an instant. Shen Qiao's words were caught in his throat. Yan Wushi turned his head and saw his expression and answered the unspoken question. "I've already memorized the contents. What's the point of keeping it?" "You could have given it to Huhuan's sect as a last resort in order to extricate yourself," said Shen Qiao. "You won't even leave yourself a way out?" "Even if I give them the silk, do you think they'd believe this is the real scroll?" Shen Qiao frowned in response. Yan Wushi sneered a little. "In the past, Ruyue's sect had a secret technique. Even you probably haven't heard of it. Bluntly speaking, when demonic persuasion is honed to the pinnacle of perfection, you can use it to control others' minds and actions, forcing them to speak the truth without realizing. If I were in their place, I too would rather use this method of obtaining the testimony I want instead of believing in a piece of silk covered in words." "So Yan Shou and the others want to take advantage of your greatly reduced cultivation to capture you, then force you to tell them the scroll's contents." "Correct," said Yan Wushi. "My value to them isn't as a corpse, but in the Zhuyang strategy and my identity as Huanyue sect's leader. With me in hand, they can easily take command of Huanyue sect." To Shen Qiao's knowledge, Yan Wushi had already read 3 out of the 5 Zhuyang strategy scrolls, most notably the one from Ruoqiang Underground. That one recorded information on how to improve and repair the Fenglin scriptures. Sang Jingxing and Yuan Xiuxiu also cultivated with the Fenglin scriptures, so they naturally understood the effects caused by the flaw in the demonic sect. Each day the flaw went unrepaired was a day they couldn't attain ultimate perfection with regards to the Fenglin scriptures. They wished to obtain this information more than anyone else. In the past, Yan Wushi would have naturally been far above them, leaving them too afraid to act rashly. But the current Yan Wushi had been ambushed by the 5 great experts and crawled back from the jaws of death. His martial abilities were significantly diminished. If they didn't act now, then when? Shen Qiao couldn't be clearer on the methods demonic practitioners used. Back then, because Shen Qiao had killed Sang Jingxing's disciple Huo Xijing, Sang Jingxing had wanted to destroy his martial arts and then break all his limbs to make him his toy. First, he wanted to play with Shen Qiao wantonly, then toss him to the rest of He Huan's sect to be ravaged. Given the long-standing antagonism between Huanyue sect and He Huan sect, as well as Yan Wushi's cutting demeanor and self-indulgent actions, the moment he fell into He Huan sect's hands, his fate certainly wouldn't be any better than Shen Qiao's. Considering this, Shen Qiao's brows knitted tighter and tighter. If that's the case, we must set out quickly, lest they catch up. Yan Wushi laughed. You're being so considerate toward me. Is it because you want me to shed tears of gratitude and pledge myself to you? Shen Qiao ignored his mocking words. Instead, he said solemnly, I know that Sect Leader Yan has never deemed anyone worthy of his attention, but this is a matter of life and death. Your flaw is still there. Your strength is inadequate. It'd be one thing if it were only Yan Shou's group, but if Sang Jingxing arrives, even I won't be able to ward him off. It's better to be cautious. But Yan Wushi didn't seem the slightest bit alarmed. He nonchalantly tossed a nearby stick into the fire, the flames leaping higher as a result. Then he suddenly changed the subject. If you could start over from the beginning, would you choose to not be saved by me at Banbu Peak? Shen Qiao started, then shook his head. I'm afraid I'd have no say to that. So you're saying that even if you already knew that you'd end up completely entangled with me, and that I'd personally deliver you to Sang Jingxing, you still wouldn't regret it? There is no cure for regrets in this world, says Shen Qiao. We can never alter the events of the past. Instead of clinging to resentment, ensuring I can never get free, I'd much rather thank you for teaching me how to view the world and the hearts of people. The firelight illuminated his earnest expression, revealing a trace of unique gentleness. Yan Wushi suddenly began to laugh. Foolish Ah Qiao, he said gently. When have I ever been good to you? He reached over, as if wanting to stroke Shen Qiao's cheek. Shen Qiao leaned back to avoid it while raising a hand to block. But he didn't expect that Yan Wushi would raise his other hand too. It wasn't to attack, though. He only swept his sleeve before Shen Qiao's eyes. Smelling something strange, Shen Qiao tried to halt his breathing, but he'd already inhaled some. His already weak body went limp entirely, and the other man took the chance to tap his acupoints. When are you going to fix your bad habit of leaving yourself unguarded? Yan Wushi shook his head. Or, do you already consider me someone you can trust, deep down? He ignored Shen Qiao's glare and lowered his head to kiss the tip of his nose. Then he lifted Shen Qiao in his arms, carrying him horizontally to the back of the Buddha statue. Only then did Shen Qiao notice that there was a large, recessed opening in the back of the statue. The inside was neither large nor small, but just enough to fit a cross-legged person within. Yan Wushi even had the leisure to explain to him. Casting a Buddha statue is quite expensive. Many temples will hollow out the back of their statues to save on costs. I've been to this temple before, and the statue is quite crudely made. Even the cavity's construction is sloppy. They only carved the front to look good, but now you'll get something big for no cost at all. Shen Qiao frowned. What exactly are you planning to do? Yan Wushi said languidly. I've also read the Juyang strategy scroll within the Imperial Palace of Northern Zhou. But, as we're in a hurry now, I don't have time to recite it for you. If you want it, you can go to Chang'an to look for Yuan Yong. He's met you before and thinks highly of you, so I'm sure he'll be happy to let you read it. Also, tell Bianyan Mei not to worry about me. He should first take advantage of Qi's annexation by Zhou and expand Huan Yuesek's influence in Qi. Shen Qiao's expression faltered. I'm not from Huan Yuesek. You shouldn't be telling me this. What does it have to do with me? Yan Wushi smiled, but didn't answer. He stroked Shen Qiao's face, purposely drawing out his movements, as if enjoying the sensation of Shen Qiao's skin against his fingers. The atmosphere took on a hint of indescribable intimacy, and Yan Wushi watched as Shen Qiao's cheeks slowly and predictably flushed with a soft, indignant red. Our Ah Chao is so good-looking, he sighed. No wonder that chit Bairong fell for you. With her around, even if she suspects something, she'll definitely help to keep you concealed and prevent you from falling into the hands of Yan Shou and the rest. If Shen Qiao still failed to understand what Yan Wushi wanted to do even after he said all this, he really would be too stupid. Yan Wushi, I didn't go through so much to help you escape just to let you leap straight into a trap. Yan Wushi laughed. I've never regretted handing you over to Sang Jingxing, even up to today. Now you have the chance to witness my misfortune. Yet you look like you're mourning your mother. Ah Chao, you've really disappointed me so. You should be reveling in my misfortune right now. You should be rejoicing inside. How can you wear such a pitiful expression? I won't be able to resist getting more intimate. After he said this, he gripped Shen Qiao's chin and lowered his head, invading him with his lips and tongue. He only stopped once Shen Qiao's breaths became disordered, his eyes glistening with moisture. I've always done as I please without a single regret. This isn't for atonement, much less something as laughable as guilt. You don't need to feel indebted to me, or go as far to harbor some self-serving wishful thoughts about the meaning of it all. That would only make me want to throw up. He used his thumb to wipe away the shine from Shen Qiao's lips and chuckled softly. This venerable one is waiting for you to make good on your promise one day. Become a worthy opponent. Then, perhaps this venerable one will deem you worthy of a second look. Shen Qiao tried with all his might to force open his acupoints, but Yan Wushi's technique was far too artful. He kept trying to no avail, until his forehead carried a sheen of sweat, his face growing even redder. It seemed Yan Wushi's words had left him both ashamed and furious. When Yan Wushi released him and attempted to stand, Shen Qiao was so anxious that even the pitch in his voice changed. Stop right there! Yan Wushi really did stop, but then he reached out again and simply tapped Shen Qiao's acupoint to mute him. Shen Qiao's chest heaved up and down, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. His gaze shimmered, wet and glistening, a sight that could move anyone. Don't show this expression to anyone. A soft laugh escaped Yan Wushi as he bent down to whisper in his ear. Otherwise, even I won't be able to hold back, much less Sang Jingxing. Once he'd finished talking, he sent the statue skittering into the wall with a strike. Shen Qiao's hiding place was now pressed tightly against the wall and thus much harder to discover. He then put out the fire, and with a wave of his sleeve, the place where Shen Qiao had been sitting was now covered in collapsed debris, erasing all trace of his presence. Yan Wushi had just finished when he felt a sense of forewarning. It was as though murderous intent was closing in from afar. When one had attained a certain level of martial prowess, they'd possess a deeply profound intuition for danger. A slight sneer twisted Yan Wushi's face. He strode out of the temple and swept forward, his figure instantly vanishing into the night. A ray of moonlight trickled through the ruined roof tiles and walls, bleeding into the temple, giving the person within the statue a glimmer of light as well. The moisture finally condensed into teardrops, which fell from Shen Qiao's eyes. Some time later, he heard someone outside say, "With his martial prowess, how could Elder Sang be unable to catch up to one insignificant Yan Wushi?" "One insignificant Yan Wushi?" Baizhong sneered. "Xiao Shishong, do you dare say that to Yan Wushi's face?" "Enough!" Yan Shou had no patience for their noise. He frowned. Yan Wushi left himself without Shen Qiao. Perhaps Shen Qiao is still hiding nearby. He just battled us earlier. His strength should be spent, and he couldn't have gone far. Search this place first. Oh my gosh, everyone. We have finished chapters 77 through 79. I know this is a shorter video, but there are so many thoughts and emotions in my head and my heart right now, and I can't even go through all of them. But like this past chapter, Sacrifice, completely screwed me up. Oh my gosh. I can't even talk about it. Well, let's just not. The only thing I do want to say is that I really appreciate Meng Xi Shi because, to my knowledge at least, out of all of the Danmei books that I've read when it has martial arts in it, females don't really get that much shine. You know, they're kind of playing the background, you know. But in this, Meng Xi Shi was like, I want to make some extraordinary women. So, of course, we have Yuan Shushu, who is like the greatest badass demonic sect leader. Then we have the Bisha sect leader, Zhao Chiying, who is amazingly talented, and they said she was like a rarity in 1 in 100 years. And then, of course, Bai Zhong, who is a BAMF. Oh my freaking God. And I love that she even gets acknowledgement. Shen Qiao acknowledges her strength and her progress in her martial arts. And even, I think even Yan Wushi did at some point. Don't quote me on that one. But I love the representation of females like being strong and powerful. Not that that's something that is a necessity or that I'm harping on, you know, female power and all that stuff. I really don't care. But the fact that it is represented in her books compared to other authors is super dope to me. Because they're very heavily male-centered for obvious reasons, right? Yeah. So yes, that's pretty much all I'm going to say. We just need to go on to chapter 80 in the next video because, yeah.